Hello bookworms! Today I'm going to be sharing some of the most popular fantasy books that I have not actually read just yet. So when I was trying to outline this video, I wanted to use one of those lists, like 100 best fantasy books of all time, and see what I've read off of it versus what I haven't. I remember that the time list from last year was kind of like a joke, like there were gaping holes in what they decided were the 100 best fantasy books of all time, so I knew right off the bat that that one would be out. So then I looked at the Goodreads list for the 100 most popular fantasy books on Goodreads, and that just seemed wildly inaccurate. Like they must have kind of doctored that list to include and disclude certain things. It was just weird because there were some extremely popular young adult and middle grade books that were missing from the list, but I know that they were including those age ranges because Chronicles of Narnia was on there. So ultimately, I did not find a list that I felt like was a good list of 100 best fantasy books, and what I decided to do was just talk about fantasy books that I know are popular through hearing about them on BookTube, through seeing how many ratings they have on Goodreads, and from how much publishers advertise them, and I made my own list of popular fantasy books that I haven't read. So let's get into it. So first up is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I haven't read this one, but I am very interested in doing so, obviously, because I have a physical copy of the book. I had been in a reading slump for a lot of last year and for the beginning of this year, but I'm finally out of it. I'm finally reading fantasy again, and I do want to prioritize The Poppy War. I don't know if I will get to it by the end of the year, but if not, definitely next year for sure. So this is one that I do want to read. Next is Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This is another one that I do want to read. I actually don't have a physical copy of this one, but I do own it digitally on Kindle, and I do really want to read this book. However, I definitely think that I will be reading The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon first. I'm definitely prioritizing that series over Priory, even though Priory is only the one giant book. But Priory, if I had to guess, I'm going to save it for next year because it is a really large, really intimidating book, and there are a lot of other series that I want to finish and want to continue with before I invest so much time in one giant book. Next is The Princess Bride by William Goldman. So I actually saw The Princess Bride pretty late in life. I hadn't seen it until Andrew had me watch it because he thought that I would enjoy it, and he was 100% correct. I absolutely loved it, but I watched it when we first started dating, which was about 7 years ago now. Princess Bride isn't something that I grew up loving. If it were, I think I probably would have read the book already. And then I had been ambivalent about whether I wanted to read it because the movie was so good that I didn't really see a need to read the book. But I have been hearing how great the book actually is, and it's kind of made me want to give it a shot. Again, it's not something that is a huge priority right now, but I could see myself reading it in the future. The next popular fantasy book that I have not yet read is The Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett. So not necessarily just The Color of Magic, but Discworld in general. I haven't read any books within the Discworld series, and I would really like to do so. I really enjoyed Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman, but I haven't read any of Terry's own series, and I really need to change that. I think I might actually own this, but I think it's in my other room because it's very pretty. So I have it on a shelf with other pretty books. At some point, I do want to give those books a try because I did think that Terry's writing was really funny in Good Omens, and I have a feeling that it's the same sense of humor in Discworld. I also have not read A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is another one where I am really interested in doing so, but I just haven't gotten to it yet. This was kind of the original Wizard Boy Magic School series, and I do really want to give it a chance and see how I feel about it. I don't know too much about it outside of that. I do know that it is a series, but it's not something that I own. I will need to get a copy of it whenever I do choose to read it. I also have not read Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb or anything within the realm of the Elderlings, though that is 100% changing very soon. This book was actually on my August TBR, though I don't know that I'm actually going to be getting to it in August, so if not, I'm definitely prioritizing it for either September or October, because I am reading this before the end of the year. Like, there is no question. It is very important to me that I finally read a Hobb and Hobb book, and I have this beautiful edition, so yeah. I'm sad that I haven't read it yet, but I'm very much looking forward to doing so. I also haven't read The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien, and I actually don't even own a copy of it, which is crazy because I own so many copies of The Lord of the Rings, I own so many copies of The Hobbit, I own so many like supplemental books to his works, but I guess I just have not purchased a copy of The Silmarillion yet. I'm thinking that when I do so, I might get the Folio Society edition to match one of my sets of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And it's also like a very pretty blue color, if I'm remembering correctly. I haven't looked it up in a while. I have been really wanting to reread the Lord of the Rings books this year, and I actually did reread The Hobbit. I think it was back in March, and I have not yet started my Lord of the Rings reread, but I definitely plan on doing so, and I think once I finish, then I'll probably try tackling the Silmarillion. That's another one that I've always been a little bit intimidated by, so I have to get over that like mental roadblock. I have also always been very curious about Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. This is like a kind of historical fantasy about, I think it's about like dueling magicians, but I'm not 100% sure. I, again, just know that this is like a really enormous book, and I just never picked it up. I don't know why. Like, I definitely owned it when I was younger, but I just never picked it up, as in like never read it. And I would like to. I am very curious about it. It's actually my brother-in-law's favorite book, like, ever. And he was recently texting me when Piranesi came out because he enjoyed that one as well, which I also have not yet read. So I feel like I should prioritize those soon too, just so that I can discuss them with him in the future. I have not read Elantris by Brandon Sanderson, but I obviously want to. Again, this is one that I do have a physical copy of, but I want to read everything that Brandon Sanderson has ever written, so this will definitely happen at some point in the future. I don't know when. I know a lot of people really enjoy this one, though it is more divisive than some of his other books because it was actually the first book that he ever published. It's actually like relatively short compared to what I'm used to from him reading like Stormlight Archive. But yeah, I definitely am excited to get to this one because I want to just read his entire backlist. And that also 100% goes for Warbreaker too. And I know that Warbreaker is kind of tied to Stormlight Archive in certain ways, so I'm really looking forward to seeing those connections once I finally do read this book as well. I have not yet read The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. I did read Joe Abercrombie's young adult series, the Shattered Sea trilogy, and I loved that. That was a really great series, so I feel like I will love his adult work as well. It's just something that I haven't gotten to yet. This is probably one of the books that's actually been on my TBR for the longest. Like, I've definitely been wanting to read it back since I joined BookTube, which was a long time ago. But yeah, I don't know why I haven't gotten to it yet, and I'm definitely going to need to do that. I also haven't read Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erikson. This is the first book in the Malazan series, or Malazan. I never know how to say it. I know Elliot always says it's Malazan because that's how the author pronounces it, but then everyone else that I watch calls it Malazan, so I don't know the right way to say it, but that series. I haven't read anything in that series, and this one I'm actually not quite sure if I want to. I think before I could even entertain the idea of reading anything in the series, I need to finish the Wheel of Time series, which is like my very long running fantasy series at the moment. Yeah, I like can't even wrap my brain around another series with so many books in it until I am done with this one. Another book I haven't read but I really want to is Kushiel's Dart by Jacqueline Carey. This series, and actually the second series too, are some of Alexa's husband Mackie's favorite books, and he got her to read all of the first trilogy, I want to say it was like last year, and she ended up really loving them, and I think she's reading the second trilogy now and she's enjoying those as well. So those are ones that I am really curious about. I feel like there was news in the past that they were going to be adapted or something, but I like haven't heard anything about it in years, and I'm curious what's going on with that. Actually, Andrew also read this book, which is funny because usually I'm the one to read things and then like hand them off to him, but he read this before I knew him, like when he was in high school. Next is Dragonflight by Anne McCafferty. I know that this is like an older kind of fantasy book, and obviously it involves dragons. I'm curious how it would hold up. I personally don't have much of an interest in reading it right now. That obviously could change in the future, but at the moment it's not something that I really see myself picking up anytime soon. And last on my list is Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. This one I'm actually dying to read. I think this book sounds absolutely amazing. I've heard so many people like sing its praises, and I know that it is a revenge story, and that sounds very appealing to me. I love when revenge stories are done well, and the fact that it is an adult revenge story I feel like is a little bit more promising than a YA revenge story, just because the character will be a little bit more mature, because basically the reason that I'm saying that is based on like past experience. So one of my favorite books of all time, my favorite classic of all time is The Count of Monte Cristo. I really, really love that book, and that is a revenge story. So if Rage of Dragons is like anything like that kind of revenge story, I am totally here for it. But I've read some YA revenge stories that tend to be like a little bit petty and immature. So yeah, I really, really want to read that book. I really need to get myself a copy of it. When I was making this list, it popped back up and I was like, oh my gosh, that's right. I do really want to get to this book. There were like a couple of Orbit releases from last year that I really want to read that I haven't gotten to yet. Like that one and also The Bone Shard Daughter. I'm planning on reading that one really soon. So that is a list of popular fantasy books that I haven't read yet. There are obviously a lot more fantasy books that I haven't read too, but I felt like these ones are the ones that I hear talked about the most, or that I see on the most lists online, like blog lists, not the lists I was talking about in the beginning, although some of them are on there too. So let me know some of the most popular fantasy books that you haven't read yet, and also let me know if there are any from this list that you think that I should prioritize and that I should like make an effort to read sooner outside of Assassin's Apprentice, because that is happening within the next month or two. That's all that I have for this video, and I will see you guys soon in a new one. Bye!